Welcome back to the Team to Beat Miami Heat podcast, your one-stop shop for daily Miami Heat content. My name is Amir. The Miami Heat are reportedly possibly interested and willing to trade forward Jimmy Butler before the NBA trade deadline on February 6th. So that's not new news. There's been a lot of noise and speculation recently, but according to NBA insider Jake Fisher, he said there is a rising belief around the NBA that the Miami Heat would move Butler for fair value. So multiple teams also believe that the veteran is seriously eyeing new destinations and might have a willingness to leave for the first time in his 6 seasons with the Miami Heat. The Heat feel confident about potentially finding a trade for Butler, as Fisher noted in the report, and said there is no concern from the organization surrounding Butler leaving without compensation returning to Miami, because the whole issue here is Jimmy Butler wanted an extension with the Miami Heat. Pat Riley said, no, you got to be healthy, and we'll wait and see. So Jimmy, who's 35 years old, wasn't able to, again, agree on that contract extension with the Miami Heat over the summer. He wanted an extra year essentially after his player option. He's going to be getting a $52.4 million contract. He has one, or that's what he has left on his contract for the 2025 season. And so he wanted to basically add an extra year where he would have the ability to play 2 more years for the Miami Heat after this season for $113 million per year. And the Miami Heat said no, as we all know. So now there is widespread belief that he's determined to decline his player option. He said he would decline that option and test free agency. He said that in the offseason. He hasn't said anything about it recently. Regardless of a possible trade, from the Heat, it doesn't matter where he ends up. He said he would still decline that option. And that's according to Fisher again. Hoops hype Michael Scotto reported on December 2nd that there's been quiet discourse in league circles surrounding the Houston Rockets and the Dallas Mavericks as suitors for Butler. We know the Mavericks don't really have the pieces or the assets that would make sense for the Miami Heat. The Houston Rockets recently, I think their front office said they don't want to make that move. I know things can change, but Houston did have a bunch of draft capital. They have 5 first-round picks. They have young players. They have some contracts they can unload as well. But it doesn't sound like those two are the ones that are going to be focusing on Jimmy Butler. But Sam Amick of The Athletic also revealed that the Golden State Warriors had expressed interest in Jimmy Butler this offseason. So I think the Brooklyn Nets also showed interest, but there was no real communication, no real offers during the offseason. But now the Jimmy Butler trade saga and rumors has continued, and there's new reports indicating that Golden State, they are the most likely team to have a substantive trade talk with the Miami Heat about Jimmy Butler, and that's according to Mark Stein. So Mark Stein is saying that Golden State is probably the only team right now that's willing to play ball, and they're looking for another superstar next to Steph Curry. And so the Warriors are one of the teams that Butler has said he's open to as a destination. That was according to Shams' report from last week. Butler's agent also indicated that he would also be open to joining Houston, Dallas, or Phoenix. That was according to Charnia, but we all know the back and forth debate that they had during that issue where Bernie Lee, Jimmy's agent, said, I didn't say any of that to Shams. And then Shams doubled down and said, I 1,000% no, this is what was told, based on his sources, that his agent has said he has a willingness to go to the teams that I just mentioned. So the Suns theoretically could pursue Jimmy Butler, but again, it's going to be complicated. They're a second apron team. So it doesn't really make sense unless the Miami Heat want Bradley Beal. I don't see them trading Kevin Durant or Booker, so you need to match the salaries directly. Beal has $110 million left on his remaining contract, even though the Heat were interested in him in the past when he was on the Wizards. It wouldn't make sense to trade Bradley Beal right now, especially when you have Tyler Hero, who's playing much better, who's way younger. With the Warriors, they are hard capped at the first apron, just like the Miami Heat. And the team will be left with just over 330,000 shy of hitting the second apron after facilitating the trade. with the Brooklyn Nets and acquiring Dennis Schroeder. So they're very close to the second apron, which would not allow them to aggregate players also in a trade for Jimmy Butler, hypothetically. So that leaves Golden State in need of shedding more than $48 million in order to fit Jimmy Butler under the cap. So they have to match that. They can't take on extra money because they'll be a second apron team. And so even if they send out Wiggins, which I think they said they don't necessarily want to do now, he's owed $26 million. The Warriors would definitely need to add multiple players to any deal, including Jimmy Butler. Jonathan Kuminga seems to be that young piece and centerpiece of the trade who has been in and out of the Warriors starting lineup throughout the season, but he could be a potential part of the trade, given that he's playing on an expiring contract. ESPN's Brian Windhorst recently reported that the Warriors owner, Joe Lacob, still has affinity for Kuminga, and they're not sure that they even want to include him in trades as well, but it's going to be a non-starter if you don't include him. I don't think the Miami Heat will trade Jimmy Butler unless Kuminga is involved. So in terms of Jimmy Butler, though, playing pretty well. He's played 18 games so far this season. He's missed a few games, but Butler's averaging 18.6 points per game, 5.3 rebounds, 4.8 assists, and 1.2 steals, which is not bad for someone who just turned 35 years old. The Warriors' interest in pairing him with Curry and Draymond Green could lead them to consider a deal, despite the concerns raised by his injury history in the regular season, as well as that expiring contract. There's no guarantee that he'll resign, but Steph needs some help, especially because the West is really loaded and he's still in his prime. Jimmy's in his twilight of his prime, I would say, but Steph Curry's still a top 5, 7, whatever player in the NBA, I would say. So the question is, though, how good would the Warriors be if they got Jimmy Butler? Because we know the Miami Heat, if they trade Jimmy Butler, we're going to be worse. We're not going to get anybody that's better than Jimmy Butler. We're going to be in a retooling kind of stage, changing the trajectory of our franchise, building around Bam, possibly now Tyler Hero, and trying to add and implement new pieces mid-season. The Miami Heat are going to fall in the standings, and you are going to be bad for a little bit, but I don't know how bad they're going to be. Again, it depends on what they get back. But how good can the Warriors be, though, if they get Jimmy Butler? Like, let's talk about that possibility. So Jimmy Butler joining forces with Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors. Um, Golden State Warriors have a free-flowing offense under Steve Kerr. They like to play small ball, like the Miami Heat. They have a lot of focus on on-ball movement, off-ball screens, and precision shooting, obviously, with Steph Curry, who's the best shooter of all time. Even though Butler is not a high-volume three-point shooter, he's shooting less threes than last season, even though he shot like 40-something% from three last year. Jimmy does bring an unmatched intensity on both ends of the floor when he is not load managing and when he's trying. And he has a proven ability to step up in big moments. We obviously know playoff Jimmy is a thing. So defensively, Butler's presence would be a great fit for Golden State because he wouldn't have to exert as much energy or focus as much offensively when you're playing next to Steph Curry. But with also Jimmy and Draymond Green directing traffic, I think Butler's two-way ability would supercharge the Warriors' perimeter defense. He can guard multiple positions just like Draymond Green. But when Jimmy's disrupting passing lanes, getting deflections, getting steals, he could serve as a reliable defensive anchor, especially in the playoffs, not like so much in the regular season, but he could be a great wing player that they need. And imagine Curry no longer having to shoulder such a heavy load on offense and defense, even though he's not a good defender, not a bad defender either. But again, he can still, in the clutch, rely on Jimmy Butler to help him offensively. This would free Steph to focus on what he does best, which is absolutely torching opponents from beyond the arc. He would let Jimmy play in the paint. Again, offensively, Butler also thrives as a playmaker. So adding another playmaker to that floor with Draymond, who's one of the best passing small ball floors in the NBA. Steph Curry, obviously a good playmaker. And then throwing in Jimmy Butler in there as another playmaker for this team will be good. He's also going to provide them with a mid-range scorer. He may not space the floor, again, like Curry or Clay did back in the day, but he's excellent at attacking closeouts. He's great at driving into the paint and finishing strong in the paint, getting to the free throw line. He's also good at kicking it out to open shooters. We see him do that with Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson. But yeah, surrounded by arguably the best shooting backcourt, or not backcourt because Clay's gone, being surrounded by the arguably, not arguably, the best shooting um, 3-point shooter in NBA history, Jimmy's strengths I think would mesh very well with that. The Warrior system would allow him to exploit mismatches too, as well. Allow him to cut off ball for easy baskets and collapse defenses. Who are going to be focused on obviously Steph Curry. Curry's gravity, which is going to be huge, would open up the floor for Jimmy Butler to operate in those isolation or pick and roll situations. Meanwhile, Butler's ability to create his own shot is going to be huge in the crunch time. It's going to take pressure off Steph Curry as well, who's often double teamed at the end of close games. So Jimmy Butler can slow the game down a little bit, get to the free throw line, and help the Warriors win a game. So again, all of this is speculation, whether or not Jimmy's going to be traded or not. There's half Heat Nation wants Jimmy to stay, the other half want them to trade Jimmy Butler. Ultimately, I just want Jimmy Butler to win a championship. Most likely is going to happen off of this team. I'd rather have him win the championship with the Miami Heat, of course. But in all likelihood, if he's actually going to win a championship before he retires, which I think he deserves, I think his best shot is with the Golden State Warriors. So we'll see if any of this smoke and all this noise is real, especially when we get closer to that February trade deadline. But yeah, once we get towards January, I'm sure there's gonna be a lot more noise about this potential trade. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the Warriors have a real shot at acquiring Jimmy Butler?